Question 1. Implementation of safe driving practices in New Brunswick requires drivers to understand and adhere to all traffic control devices. If a driver approaches a stop sign in Fredericton and believes they have a clear view of the intersection and no other vehicles are approaching, what is the legally mandated and safest course of action according to New Brunswick law? Option A. Stop the vehicle completely at the stop sign, check for traffic and pedestrians, and proceed only when it is safe to do so. Option B. Proceed through the stop sign without stopping, as the driver has a clear view and no other vehicles are present. Option C. Slow down significantly but continue through the stop sign without coming to a complete stop, as the driver is running late for an appointment. Option D. Roll through the stop sign at a slow speed, assuming other drivers will yield. The correct answer is A. Stop the vehicle completely at the stop sign, check for traffic and pedestrians, and proceed only when it is safe to do so. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to balance the immediate need to reach a destination with the paramount importance of adhering to traffic laws designed for public safety. The temptation to expedite travel by disregarding a specific traffic control device, even if perceived as minor or inconvenient, directly conflicts with the legal and ethical obligations of a licensed driver in New Brunswick. Careful judgment is required to prioritize safety and compliance over personal expediency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves stopping completely at the stop sign and yielding the right-of-way to any traffic or pedestrians before proceeding when it is safe to do so. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with Section 162 of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act, which mandates a complete stop at a stop sign. This regulation is in place to prevent collisions at intersections by ensuring drivers have a clear view of approaching traffic and can make informed decisions before entering the intersection. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to public safety and respect for the law. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding through the stop sign without coming to a complete stop, even if the driver believes no other vehicles are present, is a regulatory failure. This violates Section 162 of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and creates a significant safety risk by reducing the driver's ability to react to unexpected hazards. It demonstrates a disregard for traffic laws and a prioritization of personal convenience over the safety of others. Continuing through the stop sign because the driver is running late is an ethical and regulatory failure. While the driver's motivation is understandable, it does not justify breaking the law. The New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act does not provide exceptions for being late. This approach prioritizes personal time constraints over the established safety protocols, potentially endangering oneself and others. Slowing down significantly but not coming to a complete stop is also a regulatory failure. Section 162 of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act explicitly requires a complete stop. A rolling stop, even if slow, does not fulfill this legal requirement and still poses a risk, as the driver's reaction time and ability to assess the situation are compromised compared to a full stop. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety above all else. When faced with a situation where personal convenience conflicts with traffic laws, the professional driver must first consult the relevant legislation, in this case, the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act. They should then consider the potential consequences of noncompliance, both in terms of legal penalties and the risk of accidents. The ethical imperative to protect oneself and others should guide the decision, leading to adherence to the law regardless of personal circumstances. Question 2. To address the challenge of being stopped by law enforcement in New Brunswick and being unable to produce a valid driver's license and proof of insurance because they were left at home, which of the following actions best upholds the legal requirements for operating a motor vehicle? Option A. Proceed to the intended destination, assuming that since the documents are at home, no immediate issue will arise. Option B. Ask a passenger to pretend to be the driver and present their identification if stopped. Option C. Return home immediately to retrieve the driver's license and proof of insurance before continuing the journey. Option D. Drive to the destination and explain the situation to the police if stopped, hoping for leniency. The correct answer is C. Return home immediately to retrieve the driver's license and proof of insurance before continuing the journey. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the strict legal requirements for vehicle operation in New Brunswick. The driver is experiencing a personal inconvenience, forgetting their wallet, that could tempt them to bypass a crucial legal obligation, potentially leading to a violation. Careful judgment is required to prioritize compliance with the law over personal convenience. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves acknowledging the legal requirement to possess a valid driver's license and proof of insurance while operating a vehicle. This approach prioritizes adherence to the Motor Vehicle Act of New Brunswick. By choosing to return home to retrieve the necessary documents, the driver demonstrates an understanding of their legal responsibilities and avoids potential penalties associated with driving without proof of license and insurance. This aligns with the principle of lawful conduct expected of all licensed drivers. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves driving to the destination despite not having the required documents. This directly violates Section 236 of the Motor Vehicle Act of New Brunswick, which mandates that a driver must produce their driver's license and proof of insurance upon demand by a peace officer. This action demonstrates a disregard for the law and could result in fines, demerit points, or even vehicle impoundment. Another incorrect approach is to assume that since the driver knows they have a valid license and insurance, they can proceed without the physical documents. While the driver may indeed be licensed and insured, the law requires them to be able to produce these documents. This assumption bypasses a procedural requirement of the law and leaves the driver vulnerable to penalties if stopped by law enforcement. A further incorrect approach is to attempt to borrow a license or insurance document from someone else. This is not only illegal, but also constitutes fraud. It violates the fundamental principle of personal responsibility for one's own driving privileges and would have severe legal consequences beyond a simple traffic infraction. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must operate within the established legal and ethical frameworks. When faced with a situation where personal convenience conflicts with legal requirements, the professional decision-making process involves 1. Identifying the relevant legal obligations, in this case, carrying a driver's license and proof of insurance as per New Brunswick's Motor Vehicle Act. 2. Assessing the potential consequences of noncompliance. 3. Choosing the course of action that ensures full legal compliance, even if it involves a minor inconvenience. This prioritizes integrity and responsible conduct. Question 3. Examination of the data shows a candidate for a New Brunswick driver's license has failed a specific component of their road test. The candidate is visibly upset and asks for a clear explanation of why they did not pass, stating they believe they performed well. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner? Option A. Advise the candidate to simply reschedule the test for another day without explaining the reasons for the current failure. Option B. Clearly and patiently explain the specific reasons for the failure, referencing the relevant criteria from the official New Brunswick Driver's Handbook or associated regulations. Option C. Suggest that the examiner can provide informal assistance to help the candidate pass on their next attempt. Option D. Provide a vague response, stating that the performance was not up to standard without detailing the specific errors. Correct answer is B. Clearly and patiently explain the specific reasons for the failure, referencing the relevant criteria from the official New Brunswick Driver's Handbook or associated regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements mandated by New Brunswick law. The applicant's eagerness and potential lack of full understanding of the process, coupled with the examiner's responsibility to uphold standards, necessitates careful judgment to ensure both fairness and public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly and patiently explaining the specific reason for the failed component of the New Brunswick driver's examination, referencing the relevant criteria from the official New Brunswick Driver's Handbook or associated regulations. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the applicant's need for feedback, aligns with the examiner's duty to assess competency according to established standards, and upholds the integrity of the licensing process. Transparency about the failure and the path to improvement is ethically sound and legally compliant with the objective assessment required for a New Brunswick driver's license. Incorrect approaches analysis. Providing a vague or dismissive response that does not specify the reason for failure is professionally unacceptable. This fails to equip the applicant with the necessary information to improve and can be perceived as arbitrary, undermining the fairness of the examination process. It does not adhere to the principle of clear communication expected of examiners, suggesting that the applicant simply try again later, without any explanation of the deficiency, is also professionally unsound. This approach bypasses the core purpose of the examination, which is to assess readiness to drive safely. It implies that the outcome is not based on demonstrated skill or knowledge, which is contrary to the regulatory framework for driver licensing in New Brunswick. Offering to help them pass next time by overlooking the specific error or providing preferential treatment is a serious ethical and regulatory breach. This constitutes a conflict of interest and compromises the integrity of the driver licensing system, potentially endangering public safety by licensing an unqualified individual. It violates the examiner's duty to conduct an impartial assessment based on objective criteria. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established regulations and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing the specific requirements of the New Brunswick driver's examination. 2. Communicating clearly and respectfully with applicants, providing constructive feedback. 3. Maintaining impartiality and objectivity throughout the assessment process. 4. Recognizing and avoiding any situation that could be perceived as a conflict of interest or compromise the integrity of the licensing system. Question 4. Research into the application of New Brunswick's Graduated Driver Licensing (GDL) program has highlighted a scenario where a new driver, holding a learner's permit, is eager to gain more independent driving experience. Their supervising driver, who is qualified according to New Brunswick regulations, is considering allowing the learner to drive for a short period without them being in the passenger seat. Believing the learner is capable and the route is familiar, what is the most appropriate course of action for the supervising driver in this situation, considering the regulatory framework of New Brunswick? Option A. Let the learner drive alone, arguing that the familiarity of the route negates the need for direct supervision as per New Brunswick law. Option B. Allow the learner to drive alone for a brief period on a familiar route, as the supervising driver believes they are capable and it will build confidence. Option C. Insist on remaining in the passenger seat throughout the entire duration of the learner's driving, ensuring all New Brunswick GDL conditions are met. Option D. Permit the learner to drive alone, reasoning that the learner has demonstrated good driving skills in previous supervised sessions. The correct answer is C. Insist on remaining in the passenger seat throughout the entire duration of the learner's driving, ensuring all New Brunswick GDL conditions are met. Explanation. Research into the implementation challenges of New Brunswick's Graduated Driver Licensing (GDL) program reveals a common scenario where new drivers, eager to gain experience, may attempt to bypass certain restrictions. This situation is professionally challenging because it tests the integrity of the licensing system and the ethical responsibilities of those involved in supervising new drivers. It requires careful judgment to balance the desire for driving experience with the paramount importance of public safety and adherence to provincial law. The best approach involves a strict adherence to the New Brunswick GDL regulations, specifically the conditions and restrictions placed on learners and novice drivers. This means ensuring that any supervised driving is conducted by a qualified supervisor who meets the criteria outlined in the Motor Vehicle Act of New Brunswick, and that all other conditions, such as passenger limits and time-of-day restrictions, are meticulously followed. This approach is correct because it directly upholds the legislative intent of the GDL program, which is to gradually introduce new drivers to the complexities of driving in a controlled environment, thereby minimizing risk to themselves and others. It aligns with the province's commitment to road safety and the legal framework designed to achieve it. An approach that involves a supervisor overlooking minor infractions, such as allowing a learner to drive slightly past the permitted hours without a valid reason, is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a regulatory failure, as it directly contravenes the specific time restrictions imposed by the GDL program. Ethically, it undermines the principle of responsible supervision and prioritizes convenience over safety, potentially exposing the learner and other road users to unnecessary risks. Another unacceptable approach is allowing a driver with a learner's permit to drive without a qualified supervisor present in the vehicle, even if the driver feels confident. This is a significant regulatory failure, as the presence of a qualified supervisor is a fundamental requirement for a learner's permit. It demonstrates a disregard for the law and the safety protocols established by New Brunswick. Finally, an approach where a supervisor allows a driver with a novice license to carry more passengers than permitted, citing a special occasion, is also professionally unacceptable. This is a clear violation of the passenger restrictions stipulated in the GDL program. Such actions represent a regulatory failure and an ethical lapse, as they disregard the established safety measures designed to prevent driver distraction and maintain control, regardless of the perceived justification. Professionals tasked with supervising new drivers should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and safety above all else. This involves thoroughly understanding the specific requirements of the New Brunswick GDL program, including all restrictions and conditions. When faced with a situation where a new driver or a supervisor proposes a deviation, the professional must critically assess whether the proposed action aligns with the law and the underlying safety objectives of the GDL. If there is any doubt, or if the proposed action clearly violates a regulation, the professional must firmly uphold the law and explain the reasons for their decision, reinforcing the importance of responsible driving practices. Question 5. Which approach would be most appropriate for a new driver in New Brunswick when approaching an intersection and observing a vehicle already proceeding through it, despite the new driver having a green light? Option A. Honk the horn to alert the other driver to your presence and right-of-way. Option B. Stop abruptly before the intersection to assess the situation further. Option C. Proceed through the intersection quickly, assuming the other vehicle will yield. Option D. Yield to the vehicle already in the intersection and wait for it to clear before proceeding. The correct answer is D. Yield to the vehicle already in the intersection and wait for it to clear before proceeding. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for new drivers in New Brunswick. Encountering a situation where the standard rules of the road might seem ambiguous or potentially conflict with immediate safety needs. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations in a dynamic, real-world situation, prioritizing safety while adhering to legal requirements. A new driver must demonstrate not only knowledge of the rules, but also the judgment to apply them appropriately. The best approach involves a thorough understanding of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act, specifically sections pertaining to right-of-way and yielding. When faced with a situation where a vehicle is already in the intersection and clearly proceeding, the safest and legally compliant action is to yield. This aligns with the fundamental principle of avoiding collisions and ensuring the smooth flow of traffic. The Act implicitly prioritizes preventing accidents, and yielding to a vehicle already lawfully within the intersection is the most direct way to achieve this. This demonstrates responsible driving and adherence to the spirit and letter of traffic law, which aims to prevent hazardous situations. An incorrect approach would be to proceed into the intersection assuming the other vehicle will stop, or to attempt to beat the other vehicle. This directly violates the principle of yielding the right-of-way to a vehicle already in the intersection and creates a high risk of a collision. Such an action would be a clear contravention of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and demonstrates a lack of judgment and understanding of traffic safety. Another incorrect approach would be to stop abruptly before the intersection without a clear hazard, potentially causing a rear-end collision or impeding traffic flow unnecessarily. While caution is important, stopping without a valid reason or in a manner that creates a new hazard is not in line with safe driving practices or the intent of traffic regulations. Finally, an approach that involves honking aggressively or making gestures at the other driver is unprofessional and does not resolve the immediate traffic situation. While frustration may be present, such actions are counterproductive, can escalate the situation, and do not demonstrate adherence to safe and courteous driving as expected under New Brunswick law. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, followed by adherence to regulations, and then consideration of traffic flow. In any ambiguous situation, the safest course of action that aligns with the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act should be chosen. This involves anticipating potential hazards, understanding right-of-way rules, and making a conscious decision to avoid conflict. Question: Which approach would be most appropriate for a new driver in New Brunswick when approaching an intersection and observing a vehicle already proceeding through it, despite the new driver having a green light? Options: A. Yield to the vehicle already in the intersection and wait for it to clear before proceeding. B. Proceed through the intersection quickly, assuming the other vehicle will yield. C. Stop abruptly before the intersection to assess the situation further. D. Honk the horn to alert the other driver to your presence and right-of-way. New Brunswick Drivers Test Implementation Challenge. Question 6. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new driver in New Brunswick approaches an intersection where the traffic light is red, but a police officer is present and actively directing traffic with hand signals. What is the most appropriate action for the driver to take? Option A. Stop at the intersection and wait for the traffic light to turn green, ignoring the officer's signals. Option B. Follow the police officer's hand signals and directions for proceeding through the intersection. Option C. Remain stationary and observe the situation without acting on the officer's signals until the traffic light changes. Option D. Proceed through the intersection because the traffic light is red, indicating a stop. Correct answer is B. Follow the police officer's hand signals and directions for proceeding through the intersection. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a new driver in New Brunswick because it requires them to interpret and apply the rules of the road in a dynamic, real-world situation that deviates from standard, predictable conditions. The presence of a police officer directing traffic introduces an element of authority that supersedes standard traffic signals, demanding immediate and correct judgment to ensure safety and compliance with New Brunswick's Motor Vehicle Act. Failure to correctly interpret the officer's signals can lead to confusion, potential accidents, and traffic violations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves recognizing that a police officer directing traffic has the authority to override traffic signals. Therefore, the driver must follow the officer's explicit hand signals and directions, regardless of the status of the traffic lights. This aligns with the fundamental principle of road safety and obedience to lawful authority, as implicitly understood within the framework of traffic laws in New Brunswick, which prioritize immediate safety directives from law enforcement. Incorrect approaches analysis. Following the traffic light when a police officer is directing traffic is incorrect because it disregards the officer's authority and the immediate safety instructions being provided. This action directly violates the principle that law enforcement directives supersede standard signals in such situations and could lead to a collision or obstruction of traffic flow. Continuing through the intersection without acknowledging or obeying the officer's signals demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and a failure to comply with the directions of an authorized official, which is a serious infraction under New Brunswick's traffic regulations. Stopping at the intersection and waiting for the traffic light to change, despite the officer's directions, is also incorrect. This action creates an unnecessary obstruction and shows a failure to understand that the officer's signals are the operative instructions. It impedes traffic and shows a lack of responsiveness to the immediate traffic management needs. Remaining stationary and observing the situation without acting on the officer's signals is incorrect, as it fails to make a decision and proceed when directed, potentially causing confusion for other drivers and delaying traffic. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must prioritize safety and adherence to lawful authority. When faced with conflicting instructions or unusual circumstances, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the source of authority and the nature of the instruction, e.g., traffic signal vs. police officer. 2. Recognizing that direct, authoritative instructions from law enforcement generally supersede automated signals. 3. Prioritizing immediate safety and the smooth flow of traffic as directed by the authority figure. 4. Acting decisively and in accordance with the recognized authority. Question 7. The efficiency study reveals a need to streamline the New Brunswick driver licensing process for new applicants, considering the absolute priority of public safety and adherence to provincial regulations. Which of the following assessment strategies best ensures that new drivers are adequately prepared to operate a vehicle safely and legally on New Brunswick roads? Option A. Expedite the licensing process by issuing provisional licenses after a quick visual inspection of the applicant's vehicle and a review of basic identification documents. Option B. Implement a comprehensive assessment that includes a written knowledge test on New Brunswick traffic laws and safe driving practices, followed by a practical road test administered by a qualified examiner. Option C. Conduct a brief interview with each applicant to discuss their general driving experience and understanding of road rules. Option D. Issue licenses to applicants based on their driving records from other provinces, assuming their knowledge of traffic laws is transferable. The correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive assessment that includes a written knowledge test on New Brunswick traffic laws and safe driving practices, followed by a practical road test administered by a qualified examiner. Explanation: the efficiency study reveals a need to streamline the New Brunswick driver licensing process, particularly concerning the assessment of new applicants' understanding of provincial traffic laws and safe driving practices. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficiency with the absolute priority of ensuring that only competent and knowledgeable drivers are licensed, thereby safeguarding public safety on New Brunswick roads. A rushed or superficial assessment could lead to the licensing of individuals who pose a risk to themselves and others. The best approach involves a multifaceted assessment that directly evaluates an applicant's comprehension of New Brunswick-specific traffic regulations and safe driving techniques. This includes a written knowledge test covering provincial laws, road signs, and safe driving principles, followed by a practical road test administered by a qualified examiner. This method aligns with the core objective of the New Brunswick driver licensing system, which is to ensure drivers possess the necessary knowledge and skills to operate a vehicle safely and in compliance with provincial statutes, as mandated by the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations. This comprehensive evaluation directly addresses the syllabus requirements by testing both theoretical understanding and practical application of driving rules. An approach that relies solely on a brief interview to gauge an applicant's understanding of New Brunswick traffic laws is professionally unacceptable. This method fails to provide objective evidence of knowledge and skill, potentially overlooking critical gaps in understanding that could lead to unsafe driving. It bypasses the established testing protocols designed to ensure competency and violates the spirit of the Motor Vehicle Act by not adequately assessing the applicant's readiness to operate a vehicle safely on provincial roadways. Another unacceptable approach is to assume that an applicant's prior driving experience in another jurisdiction automatically qualifies them for a New Brunswick license, without a specific assessment of their knowledge of provincial laws. While experience is valuable, traffic laws and road conditions can vary significantly between jurisdictions. Failing to test for knowledge of New Brunswick-specific regulations, such as speed limits, parking rules, or specific intersection procedures, is a direct contravention of the licensing authority's responsibility to ensure all drivers are familiar with the rules of the road in New Brunswick. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed of processing over thoroughness, such as issuing a provisional license based on minimal documentation and a cursory visual inspection of the vehicle, is also professionally unsound. This neglects the fundamental purpose of the licensing process, which is to verify a driver's competence and knowledge before they are permitted to operate a vehicle. It creates a significant public safety risk by potentially licensing individuals who have not demonstrated the required understanding of New Brunswick's traffic laws or safe driving practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes public safety and regulatory compliance. This involves adhering strictly to the established testing procedures outlined in the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its regulations, ensuring that all applicants undergo a thorough assessment of both their theoretical knowledge and practical driving skills relevant to the province. When faced with efficiency pressures, the focus must remain on maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of the licensing process, rather than compromising on essential safety checks. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that a significant number of new drivers in New Brunswick are exhibiting confusion regarding the proper interpretation and response to various traffic control devices, particularly at complex intersections. Considering the New Brunswick Driver's Handbook and the Motor Vehicle Act, which of the following approaches best addresses this identified deficiency in driver preparedness? Option A. Encouraging new drivers to rely on their intuition and prior driving experience from other regions, with minimal emphasis on the specific nuances of New Brunswick's traffic control device regulations. Option B. Focusing on the most frequently encountered traffic control devices and expediting the review of less common ones to ensure all drivers can pass the licensing exam within a shorter time frame. Option C. Broadening the curriculum to include a general overview of traffic control devices commonly found across North America, assuming that understanding these will adequately prepare drivers for New Brunswick-specific regulations. Option D. Implementing targeted training modules that specifically review and reinforce the rules and interpretations of traffic control devices as detailed in the official New Brunswick Driver's Handbook and the Motor Vehicle Act, using practical examples relevant to New Brunswick road conditions. The correct answer is D. Implementing targeted training modules that specifically review and reinforce the rules and interpretations of traffic control devices as detailed in the official New Brunswick Driver's Handbook and the Motor Vehicle Act, using practical examples relevant to New Brunswick road conditions. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a recurring issue with new drivers in New Brunswick struggling to correctly identify and react to specific traffic control devices, particularly during complex intersection scenarios. This presents a professional challenge for driver instructors and examiners, as it directly impacts public safety and the integrity of the licensing process. Ensuring drivers possess the necessary knowledge and practical application of traffic laws is paramount. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the New Brunswick Driver's Handbook and relevant sections of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act. This approach prioritizes reinforcing the foundational knowledge of traffic control devices as outlined in official provincial documentation. By focusing on the specific regulations and guidelines mandated by New Brunswick, instructors can ensure that training directly addresses the provincial requirements and prepares drivers for the specific challenges they will encounter on New Brunswick roads. This aligns with the ethical obligation to provide competent and jurisdictionally accurate instruction. An incorrect approach would be to rely on generalized knowledge of traffic laws, or to assume that understanding of devices in other jurisdictions translates directly to New Brunswick. This fails to adhere to the specific legal framework of New Brunswick, potentially leading to drivers being unprepared for local signage and signals. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of instruction over thoroughness, skipping detailed explanations of less common but critical traffic control devices. This neglects the responsibility to ensure comprehensive understanding and can create dangerous knowledge gaps. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on passing the test rather than fostering genuine understanding of traffic control device principles and their implications for safe driving is ethically unsound and undermines the purpose of driver licensing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the specific knowledge gaps identified by the efficiency study. This should then be followed by a thorough review of the official New Brunswick Driver's Handbook and the Motor Vehicle Act to ensure all training materials and methods are compliant and comprehensive. Regular assessment of driver understanding, using scenarios that mirror real-world New Brunswick driving conditions, is crucial. This iterative process of learning, application, and assessment, grounded in provincial law, ensures effective and safe driver training. Question 9. The efficiency study reveals a recurring challenge in the New Brunswick driver licensing process. A significant number of applicants are failing the road test due to a lack of practical application of specific traffic laws, particularly those related to merging onto highways and yielding at uncontrolled intersections. Considering the paramount importance of public safety and the regulatory framework of New Brunswick, what is the most effective strategy to address this identified deficiency? Option A. Implement a system where examiners can rely more heavily on their personal judgment and experience to pass or fail applicants in these specific situations, without formal changes to the test criteria. Option B. Revise the road test criteria to more rigorously assess practical application of critical driving maneuvers in real-world scenarios, such as complex highway merges and decision-making at uncontrolled intersections, and ensure examiner training reflects these updated standards. Option C. Lower the passing score for the practical road test to improve the overall pass rate and reduce the backlog of applicants. Option D. Increase the number of theoretical questions on the written knowledge test that specifically cover highway merging and uncontrolled intersection rules. The correct answer is B. Revise the road test criteria to more rigorously assess practical application of critical driving maneuvers in real-world scenarios, such as complex highway merges and decision-making at uncontrolled intersections, and ensure examiner training reflects these updated standards. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a recurring challenge in the New Brunswick driver licensing process. A significant number of applicants are failing the road test due to a lack of practical application of specific traffic laws, particularly those related to merging onto highways and yielding at uncontrolled intersections. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public safety and the integrity of the licensing system. Examiners must balance the need for thorough assessment with the efficient processing of applicants, while strictly adhering to the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations. The core issue is ensuring that the road test accurately reflects real-world driving conditions and assesses competency in critical safety maneuvers, rather than just rote memorization. The best approach involves a comprehensive review and potential revision of the road test criteria to more heavily emphasize practical demonstration of skills in high-risk scenarios. This means incorporating more complex merging situations, requiring applicants to demonstrate proactive scanning and judgment at uncontrolled intersections, and ensuring examiners are trained to assess decision-making under pressure. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the identified deficiency by aligning the test with actual driving demands and prioritizing public safety, which is the paramount ethical and regulatory obligation of driver licensing authorities in New Brunswick. It ensures that licensed drivers possess the necessary skills to navigate common, potentially dangerous situations safely, thereby upholding the standards set by the Motor Vehicle Act. An approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of questions on the written knowledge test without altering the practical road test is incorrect. While knowledge is important, it does not guarantee safe driving behavior. The identified problem is a failure in practical application, which a written test cannot adequately assess. This approach fails to address the root cause of the issue and risks issuing licenses to individuals who may know the rules but cannot execute them safely. Another incorrect approach would be to simply lower the passing standard for the road test to increase the pass rate. This is ethically unacceptable and a direct violation of the regulatory intent to ensure competent drivers. Public safety would be compromised by licensing individuals who have not demonstrated the required level of skill. This approach prioritizes efficiency over safety and undermines the credibility of the licensing program. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence from examiners without a systematic data collection and analysis process is also flawed. While examiner feedback is valuable, it needs to be substantiated by objective data to identify systemic issues and justify changes to the testing protocol. Without this, decisions may be arbitrary and not effectively address the identified efficiency and safety concerns. Professionals should employ a data-driven decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the problem through objective data, e.g., pass/fail rates, common error types. 2. Analyzing the root causes of the problem, considering both knowledge gaps and practical skill deficiencies. 3. Developing potential solutions that directly address the identified causes and align with regulatory requirements and ethical obligations, public safety. 4. Evaluating the feasibility and impact of each solution. 5. Implementing the most effective solution and continuously monitoring its impact to ensure ongoing improvement. Question 10. Quality control measures reveal that a candidate arriving for their New Brunswick driver's road test in Fredericton is using a vehicle with a malfunctioning turn signal on the rear passenger side and a tire with tread depth slightly below the legal minimum for New Brunswick. The examiner must decide how to proceed. Option A. Allow the test to proceed, assuming the vehicle's other safety features are adequate and that the minor defects will not significantly impact the candidate's performance or road safety. Option B. Conduct the road test, but instruct the candidate to manually signal turns and to drive with extra caution due to the tire condition. Option C. Postpone the road test until the candidate presents a vehicle that fully meets all New Brunswick safety and operational standards. Option D. Proceed with the road test, noting the minor turn signal issue and the tire tread depth as potential areas for future improvement, but deeming them not critical enough to halt the test. The correct answer is C. Postpone the road test until the candidate presents a vehicle that fully meets all New Brunswick safety and operational standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for driving instructors and examiners in New Brunswick, ensuring that the vehicle used for the road test meets all safety and operational standards, which directly impacts the integrity of the testing process and public safety. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to facilitate the test with the absolute requirement of a roadworthy vehicle, as mandated by New Brunswick's Motor Vehicle Act and associated regulations. Failure to do so could result in an invalid test, potential liability, and compromised road safety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough pre-test inspection of the vehicle's essential safety features, including brakes, steering, lights, tires, and horn, as per the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act, specifically referencing sections related to vehicle safety standards and requirements for operation on public roads. This proactive measure ensures that the vehicle is legally compliant and safe to operate, thereby upholding the integrity of the driver's examination process. This aligns with the ethical obligation to promote road safety and adhere strictly to regulatory requirements for vehicle fitness. Incorrect approaches analysis. Using a vehicle with a known, minor defect that does not immediately compromise steering or braking, but is still a violation of safety standards, is professionally unacceptable. While the defect might seem insignificant, the Motor Vehicle Act does not permit exceptions for minor safety issues during a road test. This approach risks an invalid test, and more importantly, could potentially lead to a dangerous situation if the defect exacerbates during the test. Proceeding with the test in a vehicle where the horn is not functioning correctly, despite the instructor believing it is a minor issue, is also professionally unacceptable. Horn is a critical safety device for alerting other road users, and its proper functioning is a non-negotiable requirement for vehicle operation on public roads in New Brunswick. Failing to address this directly contravenes the spirit and letter of the law regarding vehicle safety. Conducting the test in a vehicle with a cracked windshield that obstructs the driver's view, even if the crack is in the passenger's side, is professionally unacceptable. The Motor Vehicle Act mandates clear visibility for the driver. A cracked windshield, regardless of its location, can impair the driver's ability to perceive hazards and react appropriately, compromising both the test's validity and overall road safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals in New Brunswick must adopt a risk-averse and compliance-focused approach. The decision-making framework should prioritize adherence to the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its regulations. This involves a systematic pre-test checklist that verifies all mandated safety features. If any component fails to meet the required standards, the test must be postponed until a compliant vehicle is available. This ensures that the testing environment is safe, fair, and legally sound, protecting both the applicant and the public. Question 11. Cost-benefit analysis shows that providing a complete and accurate driving history, including any past suspensions or revocations from other provinces, is the most prudent approach when applying for New Brunswick driver's license. Which of the following actions best reflects this understanding and adheres to New Brunswick's regulatory framework for driver licensing? Option A. Only disclose driving suspensions or revocations that occurred within New Brunswick, assuming out-of-province incidents are not relevant. Option B. Provide a driving history that omits any past suspensions or revocations, believing that older incidents are no longer significant. Option C. Assume that the New Brunswick Department of Public Safety will not discover past driving infractions from other provinces and therefore does not need to be informed. Option D. Disclose all past driving suspensions and revocations, regardless of the jurisdiction in which they occurred, to the New Brunswick Department of Public Safety. The correct answer is D. Disclose all past driving suspensions and revocations, regardless of the jurisdiction in which they occurred, to the New Brunswick Department of Public Safety. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a New Brunswick driver's license. The challenge lies in accurately and ethically representing their driving history to the Department of Public Safety. Misrepresenting information, even unintentionally, can lead to serious consequences, including license denial, revocation, or even legal penalties. The driver must understand the importance of full disclosure and the potential ramifications of omissions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice is to provide a complete and truthful account of all driving history, including any past suspensions or revocations, regardless of how long ago they occurred, or whether they were in New Brunswick or another jurisdiction. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation of honesty and the regulatory requirement under the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act to provide accurate information when applying for a license. Full disclosure ensures that the Department of Public Safety can make an informed decision about the applicant's eligibility and assess any potential risks associated with issuing a license. Transparency is paramount in maintaining the integrity of the licensing system and ensuring public safety on New Brunswick roads. Incorrect approaches analysis, providing only a partial history, omitting past suspensions or revocations from other provinces, is ethically problematic as it constitutes a misrepresentation of facts. This failure violates the principle of honesty and directly contravenes the regulatory expectation of complete disclosure. Such an omission could lead to the applicant being deemed unfit to hold a license, resulting in denial or subsequent revocation. Similarly, assuming that a past suspension from another province is irrelevant or will not be discovered is a flawed judgment that disregards the interconnectedness of provincial driving records and the potential for cross-jurisdictional information sharing. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of the comprehensive nature of driver licensing and the seriousness with which driving infractions are treated. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should always prioritize honesty and full disclosure. When in doubt about what information to provide, it is best to err on the side of over-disclosure and provide all relevant details. Applicants should be encouraged to review their driving records from all jurisdictions where they have previously held a license and to be prepared to explain any past issues. The decision-making framework should involve understanding the legal and ethical obligations, assessing the potential consequences of both disclosure and non-disclosure, and always acting with integrity. Question 12. Cost-benefit analysis shows that streamlining the New Brunswick driver's license road test process could reduce wait times. However, as a New Brunswick provincial examiner, what is the most critical factor to consider when evaluating potential process optimizations to ensure compliance with provincial regulations and public safety? Option A. Strict adherence to the New Brunswick Driver Examination Procedures Manual and the Motor Vehicle Act, ensuring all evaluation criteria are met regardless of perceived efficiency gains. Option B. Expediting the test by shortening the route or reducing the number of required maneuvers to accommodate more applicants per day. Option C. Allowing examiners discretion to waive minor infractions if the applicant demonstrates overall driving competence and the examiner believes they are safe to drive. Option D. Focusing on the applicant's confidence and ability to navigate common traffic situations, with less emphasis on precise adherence to all prescribed maneuvers. The correct answer is A. Strict adherence to the New Brunswick Driver Examination Procedures Manual and the Motor Vehicle Act, ensuring all evaluation criteria are met regardless of perceived efficiency gains. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient service delivery with the absolute priority of ensuring driver safety and compliance with New Brunswick's Motor Vehicle Act and associated regulations. Misinterpreting or overlooking specific requirements, even with good intentions, can lead to unsafe road conditions or legal repercussions for both the applicant and the examiner. The pressure to process applicants quickly can create a temptation to cut corners, which is ethically and legally unacceptable. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously following the established New Brunswick Driver Examination Procedures Manual. This manual outlines the specific criteria for assessing a driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely and competently in the province's unique road conditions and traffic laws. Adhering strictly to the manual ensures that all applicants are evaluated consistently and fairly against the same objective standards, thereby upholding the integrity of the licensing process and prioritizing public safety, as mandated by the Motor Vehicle Act. This approach directly addresses the core responsibility of the examiner to verify that an individual possesses the necessary skills and knowledge to drive legally and safely within New Brunswick. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing the applicant's perceived confidence or the examiner's personal judgment over the standardized evaluation criteria. This is ethically flawed as it introduces subjectivity and bias into the assessment, potentially leading to the licensing of drivers who do not meet the minimum safety standards required by New Brunswick law. It undermines the fairness and reliability of the examination process. Another incorrect approach is to overlook minor errors or deviations from the prescribed driving maneuvers if the applicant appears to be generally competent or if the examiner is under time pressure. This directly contravenes the Motor Vehicle Act's emphasis on safe driving practices and the detailed requirements outlined in the Driver Examination Procedures Manual. Such leniency can inadvertently permit unsafe driving habits to be licensed, posing a risk to other road users in New Brunswick. A third incorrect approach is to allow an applicant to proceed with the examination despite clear evidence of a mechanical issue with the vehicle that could compromise safety. The New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act mandates that vehicles used for road tests must be in safe operating condition. Failing to address such issues before or during the test demonstrates a disregard for safety protocols and the legal requirements for vehicle operation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and public safety above all else. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding and internalizing the New Brunswick Driver Examination Procedures Manual and the Motor Vehicle Act. 2. Applying these standards objectively and consistently to every applicant. 3. Recognizing that efficiency should never come at the expense of safety or fairness. 4. Documenting all observations and decisions meticulously. 5. Seeking clarification or guidance from supervisors when faced with ambiguous situations. Question 13. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, streamlined driver testing protocol in New Brunswick could significantly reduce applicant wait times, which approach best balances efficiency gains with the regulatory mandate for driver competency and public safety. Option A. Allow for a portion of the practical driving assessment to be conducted by individuals who have completed a brief online training module without formal certification as driver examiners. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the current testing procedures to identify specific areas for optimization, such as refining examiner training and standardizing evaluation criteria, while ensuring all core safety competencies are rigorously assessed. Option C. Reduce the duration of the practical driving examination by eliminating certain maneuvers and shortening the on-road assessment period. Option D. Implement strict, non-negotiable time limits for each component of the driving test to ensure a consistent throughput of applicants. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the current testing procedures to identify specific areas for optimization, such as refining examiner training and standardizing evaluation criteria, while ensuring all core safety competencies are rigorously assessed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient road testing with the paramount importance of ensuring driver competency and public safety on New Brunswick roads. The pressure to reduce wait times can create a temptation to cut corners, but the regulatory framework for driver licensing in New Brunswick strictly prohibits compromising safety standards for expediency. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement process improvements that enhance efficiency without undermining the integrity of the licensing process. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic review of the current driver testing process to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies, followed by the implementation of targeted, evidence-based improvements that maintain or enhance safety standards. This approach aligns with the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations, which mandate that driver testing must adequately assess a driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely. By focusing on optimizing existing procedures, such as refining examiner training, standardizing evaluation criteria, or exploring technology to streamline administrative tasks, the goal is to achieve greater efficiency without compromising the thoroughness of the assessment. This ensures that only qualified drivers are licensed, thereby upholding the public interest in road safety as mandated by provincial law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves reducing the duration or scope of the practical driving examination to expedite testing. This directly violates the spirit and letter of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act, which requires a comprehensive assessment of a driver's skills. Shortening the test risks allowing unqualified individuals to obtain licenses, thereby increasing the risk of accidents and endangering other road users. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed over examiner judgment by implementing rigid time limits for each segment of the test, regardless of the applicant's performance or the complexity of the driving environment. This can lead to examiners rushing through evaluations, potentially overlooking critical errors, or failing to adequately assess a candidate's ability to handle unexpected situations, which is a core requirement for safe driving in New Brunswick. A third incorrect approach is to delegate testing responsibilities to individuals without proper certification or oversight, or to rely solely on theoretical knowledge without sufficient practical assessment. The regulations in New Brunswick clearly outline the qualifications and responsibilities of driver examiners, and any deviation from these standards compromises the validity of the testing process and public trust. Professional reasoning. Professionals in driver licensing should adopt a continuous improvement mindset guided by regulatory compliance and a commitment to public safety. This involves regularly evaluating processes, seeking feedback from examiners and the public, and staying abreast of best practices in driver education and testing. When considering process changes, the primary question should always be, does this change maintain or improve the safety and effectiveness of the driver licensing process in New Brunswick? Any proposed change that could potentially compromise safety or the thoroughness of the assessment should be rejected or significantly modified. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that streamlining the New Brunswick driver's licensing road test process could increase applicant throughput. Considering the regulatory framework governing driver testing in New Brunswick, which approach best balances efficiency with the mandate to ensure driver competency and public safety. Option A. Focusing primarily on the applicant's ability to follow basic directions and maintain lane position, while de-emphasizing complex decision-making scenarios. Option B. Reducing the number of required maneuvers or observation points during the test to expedite the process for applicants who appear confident. Option C. Allowing examiners to use their discretion to pass applicants who demonstrate basic control of the vehicle, even if some specific skills are not fully evaluated. Option D. Strictly adhering to the standardized New Brunswick driver's test checklist and evaluation criteria for every applicant, ensuring all required skills are assessed thoroughly regardless of time constraints. The correct answer is D. Strictly adhering to the standardized New Brunswick driver's test checklist and evaluation criteria for every applicant, ensuring all required skills are assessed thoroughly regardless of time constraints. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient road testing with the paramount importance of ensuring driver competency and public safety on New Brunswick roads. The pressure to process more applicants quickly can create a temptation to cut corners, which directly conflicts with the regulatory mandate to thoroughly assess a driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely and responsibly. Careful judgment is required to uphold safety standards while also managing operational demands. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing a comprehensive and standardized evaluation of each applicant's driving skills, adhering strictly to the New Brunswick Driver's Handbook and the official testing procedures. This approach ensures that every driver who passes the test demonstrates a minimum level of proficiency and understanding of traffic laws and safe driving techniques, as mandated by the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations. This upholds the integrity of the licensing process and contributes to road safety for all New Brunswick residents. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves expediting the testing process by skipping certain maneuvers or reducing the observation time for specific skills. This directly violates the regulatory requirement for a standardized and thorough assessment. It compromises the integrity of the testing process and increases the risk of licensing individuals who may not be fully prepared to drive safely, potentially leading to accidents and contravening the spirit and letter of the Motor Vehicle Act. Another incorrect approach is to allow personal biases or subjective interpretations of driving errors to influence the pass/fail decision, rather than strictly applying the established criteria outlined in the official testing guidelines. This introduces inconsistency and unfairness into the evaluation process, undermining public trust in the licensing system, and potentially leading to the licensing of unsafe drivers or the failure of competent ones, which is ethically unsound and contrary to regulatory fairness principles. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the speed of completion without adequately assessing the applicant's adherence to traffic laws, hazard perception, and defensive driving techniques. While efficiency is desirable, it must not come at the expense of thoroughness. This approach neglects the core purpose of the driver's test, which is to ensure drivers can navigate New Brunswick's roads safely and legally, thereby failing to meet the public safety objectives set by provincial legislation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and public safety above all else. This involves a commitment to continuous professional development to stay abreast of any updates to the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and testing standards. When faced with operational pressures, professionals must refer back to the established testing protocols and regulatory guidelines to ensure all evaluations are conducted fairly, consistently, and with the primary objective of licensing safe and competent drivers for New Brunswick's roadways. Question 15. Cost-benefit analysis shows that focusing solely on memorizing answers from unofficial online practice tests for the New Brunswick driver's license, while seemingly efficient, might overlook crucial aspects of safe driving. Considering the regulatory framework for obtaining a driver's license in New Brunswick, which approach to preparing for the road test is most likely to lead to long-term safe driving and successful test completion. Option A. Concentrating efforts on completing as many online practice tests as possible to identify and memorize common test questions and answers. Option B. Practicing driving only in quiet residential streets and avoiding any complex maneuvers or challenging traffic situations until the day of the test. Option C. Relying primarily on informal online driving tutorials and advice from friends who have recently passed their road tests, assuming their experiences are universally applicable. Option D. A structured learning plan that integrates thorough study of the official New Brunswick Driver's Handbook with supervised practical driving experience, focusing on understanding and applying traffic laws and safe driving techniques. The correct answer is D. A structured learning plan that integrates thorough study of the official New Brunswick Driver's Handbook with supervised practical driving experience, focusing on understanding and applying traffic laws and safe driving techniques. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applicant in New Brunswick who is seeking to optimize their learning process for the road test. The challenge lies in balancing efficiency with thoroughness, ensuring that the chosen learning methods are not only cost-effective, but also fully compliant with New Brunswick's driver licensing regulations and promote safe driving practices. A superficial approach to preparation could lead to a failed test, increased costs, and potentially unsafe driving habits. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a structured learning plan that prioritizes understanding and application of the New Brunswick Driver's Handbook and practical skills development through supervised practice. This method is correct because it directly aligns with the stated objectives of the New Brunswick Driver Licensing Program, which are to ensure drivers possess the knowledge and skills necessary for safe operation of a vehicle. Adhering to the official handbook ensures the applicant is learning the specific rules and regulations applicable in New Brunswick. Supervised practice, ideally with a qualified instructor or experienced licensed driver, allows for real-time feedback and correction of errors, reinforcing safe driving habits and test-taking strategies. This comprehensive preparation minimizes the risk of failure and promotes long-term safe driving. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on informal online videos and peer advice without consulting official New Brunswick resources. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the authoritative and legally mandated information contained within the New Brunswick Driver's Handbook. Online content can be outdated, inaccurate, or not specific to New Brunswick's traffic laws and road test requirements, leading to a misunderstanding of critical regulations and potentially unsafe practices. Another incorrect approach is to focus exclusively on memorizing the questions and answers from practice tests without understanding the underlying principles. This is professionally unacceptable as it fails to develop genuine driving competency. The road test assesses the applicant's ability to apply knowledge and judgment in real-world driving situations, not just recall specific answers. This superficial preparation can lead to poor decision-making on the road, even if the applicant passes the test. A third incorrect approach is to only practice driving in familiar, low-traffic areas and avoid complex intersections or challenging road conditions. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a false sense of security and leaves the applicant unprepared for the diverse conditions they will encounter on the road test and in everyday driving. The road test is designed to evaluate a driver's ability to handle a variety of situations safely, and avoiding them during practice is a significant oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach driver preparation with a commitment to thoroughness and compliance. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the official regulatory requirements, New Brunswick Driver's Handbook. 2. Developing a learning plan that systematically covers all required knowledge and skills. 3. Seeking supervised practice that provides constructive feedback and exposure to varied driving conditions. 4. Regularly assessing progress against the official test criteria. This systematic and compliant approach ensures both successful test completion and the development of a safe, responsible driver. Question 16. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to streamline the driver's license application process in New Brunswick. A licensing officer is presented with an applicant who has a valid driver's license from another Canadian province and claims to have recently moved to New Brunswick. The applicant provides a utility bill with their name and a New Brunswick address, but the bill is from 2 months ago, and the applicant states they have not yet received a new bill at their current residence. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing officer to ensure compliance with New Brunswick's driver's licensing regulations? Option A. Issue a temporary driver's license based on the out-of-province license and the provided utility bill, with a note to follow up on the residency verification at a later date. Option B. Request additional proof of New Brunswick residency, such as a lease agreement, bank statement, or employment letter, to supplement the existing utility bill and fully satisfy the residency requirements as stipulated by New Brunswick law. Option C. Advise the applicant that they must wait until they receive a more recent utility bill before their application can be considered, potentially delaying the process significantly. Option D. Accept the out-of-province driver's license and the 2-month-old utility bill as sufficient proof of identity and residency, and proceed with issuing the New Brunswick driver's license to expedite the process. The correct answer is B. Request additional proof of New Brunswick residency, such as a lease agreement, bank statement, or employment letter, to supplement the existing utility bill and fully satisfy the residency requirements as stipulated by New Brunswick law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient service delivery with the absolute necessity of adhering to New Brunswick's motor vehicle regulations, specifically concerning the proper issuance of driver's licenses. Misinterpreting or circumventing established procedures, even with good intentions, can lead to significant legal and ethical breaches, undermining public trust and the integrity of the licensing system. The pressure to process applications quickly must not override the legal requirements for verification. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously verifying all submitted documentation against the requirements outlined in the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations. This includes confirming the authenticity of identification documents, proof of residency, and any other required paperwork. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legal mandate to ensure that only eligible individuals are issued driver's licenses, thereby upholding public safety and the rule of law. Adherence to these regulations is paramount and non-negotiable for licensing officers. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting a driver's license from another Canadian province as sufficient proof of identity and residency without further verification, even if the applicant claims to have recently moved to New Brunswick and lacks local documentation. This fails to comply with New Brunswick's specific requirements for establishing residency and identity for licensing purposes, which may necessitate additional proof beyond a provincial license from elsewhere. Another incorrect approach is to expedite the licensing process for an applicant who appears credible and has a valid out-of-province driver's license by overlooking minor discrepancies in their proof of address documents. This bypasses the regulatory requirement for satisfactory proof of New Brunswick residency, potentially leading to licenses being issued to individuals who do not meet the provincial criteria. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the applicant's verbal assurance that they have met all requirements, even when presented with incomplete or questionable documentation. This disregards the established procedural safeguards designed to prevent fraudulent applications and ensure compliance with New Brunswick's licensing laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a systematic decision-making process that prioritizes regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the specific requirements of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and related regulations for all aspects of driver's license issuance. 2. Implementing a checklist-based verification process for all submitted documents. 3. Seeking clarification from supervisors or legal counsel when encountering ambiguous situations or incomplete documentation. 4. Never assuming an applicant meets requirements without concrete, verifiable proof according to the law. 5. Recognizing that efficiency should never compromise the integrity of the licensing process. Question 17. The performance metrics show a concerning upward trend in drivers failing the New Brunswick road test specifically due to errors in executing lane changes. Considering the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act's emphasis on safe driving practices, what is the most appropriate initial step to address this trend? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the lane change evaluation criteria within the road test, examiner training materials, and recent test data to identify specific areas of deficiency and implement targeted improvements. Option B. Immediately increase the complexity and frequency of lane change maneuvers required during the road test to better challenge applicants. Option C. Rely on informal discussions with a select group of experienced examiners to gauge their opinions on why drivers are failing lane changes. Option D. Reduce the number of lane change maneuvers assessed during the road test to expedite the testing process and improve overall pass rates. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the lane change evaluation criteria within the road test, examiner training materials, and recent test data to identify specific areas of deficiency and implement targeted improvements. Explanation. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in the number of drivers failing the New Brunswick road test for improper lane changes. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires identifying the root cause of this trend and implementing effective solutions that align with the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations, while also ensuring public safety and the integrity of the licensing process. A balance must be struck between thorough assessment and efficient administration. The best approach involves a systematic review of the road test evaluation criteria and examiner training related to lane changes. This includes analyzing recent test results for patterns in examiner feedback, reviewing the specific maneuvers identified as problematic, and assessing the clarity and consistency of the lane change instructions provided to applicants. If deficiencies are found in the current evaluation methods or training, the appropriate action would be to revise the testing protocols and provide targeted retraining to examiners to ensure standardized and fair assessment of lane change skills, directly addressing the observed performance metric. This aligns with the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act's objective of ensuring drivers possess the necessary skills for safe operation of a vehicle. An approach that focuses solely on increasing the difficulty of the lane change portion of the test, without understanding the underlying reasons for failure, is procedurally flawed. This could lead to arbitrary failures and undermine the fairness of the testing process, potentially violating the spirit of equitable assessment mandated by provincial regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to simply reduce the number of lane change maneuvers required during the test. While this might superficially improve pass rates, it fails to address the core issue of driver competency in this critical skill. This could compromise public safety by licensing drivers who have not demonstrated adequate proficiency, contravening the primary goal of the licensing system to ensure safe road users. Furthermore, an approach that involves anecdotal evidence from a few examiners without a broader data analysis is insufficient. Professional decision-making in this context requires a data-driven approach. Professionals should first gather comprehensive data on the failures, analyze trends, consult relevant sections of the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and its regulations concerning driver competency and testing standards, and then develop targeted interventions. This structured process ensures that any changes made are evidence-based, procedurally sound, and ultimately contribute to improved driver safety and a more effective licensing system. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that expediting the driver's examination process by overlooking minor equipment discrepancies could save time. However, when a vehicle presented for a New Brunswick driver's examination is found to have a non-functional horn, what is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner, considering the regulatory framework? Option A. Allow the applicant to proceed with the driving portion of the examination, advising them to repair the horn later. Option B. Fail the vehicle inspection component of the examination due to the non-functional horn as it is a required safety feature under New Brunswick law. Option C. Focus solely on the applicant's driving performance and disregard the vehicle's equipment status for this particular examination. Option D. Note the missing horn as a minor issue and proceed with the examination, assuming it does not significantly impact immediate driving safety. The correct answer is B. Fail the vehicle inspection component of the examination due to the non-functional horn, as it is a required safety feature under New Brunswick law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient service delivery with the absolute priority of ensuring driver safety and compliance with New Brunswick's Motor Vehicle Act and associated regulations. The temptation to expedite a process that appears minor can lead to overlooking critical safety checks, potentially resulting in an unsafe vehicle being allowed on the road, which carries significant legal and ethical ramifications for the examiner and the Department of Public Safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously following the established New Brunswick Driver Examination Procedures Manual for all vehicle inspections, regardless of perceived minor issues. This approach prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance above all else. Specifically, it mandates a thorough check of all required safety equipment, including functional headlights, taillights, brake lights, turn signals, and a properly functioning horn, as stipulated by the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act. Even if a vehicle appears to be in generally good condition, the absence of a functional horn is a direct contravention of the Act's equipment requirements for vehicle operation. Adhering to the manual ensures consistency, fairness, and upholds the department's commitment to public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to overlook the missing horn, deeming it a minor issue that does not significantly impact the vehicle's ability to be driven safely in most conditions. This fails to recognize that the horn is a legally mandated safety device intended for alerting other road users in critical situations, as defined by the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act. Its absence constitutes a failure to meet the minimum equipment standards for roadworthiness. Another incorrect approach is to allow the applicant to proceed with the examination, promising to address the horn issue later or suggesting the applicant fix it after passing. This bypasses the regulatory requirement for a complete and compliant vehicle at the time of the examination. It creates a loophole that undermines the integrity of the testing process and potentially allows an unsafe vehicle onto public roads. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on the applicant's driving skills without adequately inspecting the vehicle's mechanical and safety features. While driving ability is crucial, the examination also includes a mandatory vehicle safety inspection component. Neglecting this aspect of the examination, even if the driving performance is excellent, means the examination is incomplete and fails to meet the regulatory requirements for issuing a driver's license. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a systematic and rule-based decision-making process. When faced with a discrepancy between a perceived minor issue and a clear regulatory requirement, the regulatory requirement must always take precedence. The process should involve 1. Identifying all mandatory inspection points as outlined in the official New Brunswick Driver Examination Procedures Manual. 2. Verifying the functionality of each required component. 3. If a component fails to meet the standard, documenting the failure and its regulatory basis. 4. Communicating the failure clearly to the applicant, explaining the specific requirement that was not met and the implications for passing the examination. This ensures that decisions are objective, defensible, and prioritize public safety in accordance with New Brunswick law. Question 19. Market research demonstrates that parents often want their children to obtain a driver's license as quickly as possible. In New Brunswick, a driving instructor has a student who is eager to take their road test, and the parent is pressuring the instructor to recommend the student for the test, even though the instructor has observed that the student consistently struggles with identifying potential hazards and demonstrating defensive driving techniques. What is the most responsible course of action for the driving instructor to take? Option A. Proceed with recommending the student for the road test, assuming the examiner will identify any significant safety issues during the test itself. Option B. Recommend the student for the road test immediately, focusing only on the specific maneuvers the examiner is known to test to ensure they pass. Option C. Allow the parent to instruct the student on how to trick the examiner or focus only on what the examiner wants to see, without the instructor's direct oversight or correction. Option D. Advise the student and parent that the student requires more practice to meet the new Brunswick driver licensing standards for safe operation, and postpone the road test recommendation until proficiency is demonstrated. The correct answer is D. Advise the student and parent that the student requires more practice to meet the new Brunswick driver licensing standards for safe operation, and postpone the road test recommendation until proficiency is demonstrated. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in New Brunswick because it involves balancing the immediate need for a student to pass their road test with the paramount responsibility of ensuring they are a safe and competent driver. The pressure from a parent to expedite the process, potentially overlooking crucial safety aspects, creates an ethical dilemma. A driving instructor must adhere to the standards set by the New Brunswick Department of Public Safety and the Motor Vehicle Act, which prioritize public safety over individual convenience or parental pressure. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough assessment of the student's readiness based on established New Brunswick driver training standards. This means ensuring the student has mastered all required skills, understands traffic laws as outlined in the New Brunswick Driver's Handbook, and demonstrates consistent safe driving habits. The instructor must communicate clearly with both the student and the parent about the student's progress and the objective criteria for passing the road test, as mandated by the New Brunswick Department of Public Safety's driver examination standards. If the student does not meet these standards, the instructor has an ethical and regulatory obligation to recommend further practice and postpone the road test until proficiency is achieved. This approach upholds the integrity of the licensing process and protects public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. Recommending the student for the road test despite clear deficiencies in hazard perception and defensive driving techniques is a direct violation of the instructor's duty of care and the regulatory framework governing driver training in New Brunswick. This approach prioritizes expediency over safety, potentially leading to an unlicensed driver who poses a risk to themselves and others. It undermines the purpose of the driver's licensing system, which is to ensure all licensed drivers possess the necessary skills to operate a vehicle safely. Suggesting the student focus solely on the specific maneuvers the examiner is known to test, while neglecting broader safe driving principles, is also professionally unacceptable. This strategy circumvents the spirit of the New Brunswick road test, which aims to assess overall competency, not just the ability to perform isolated tasks. It fails to equip the student with the comprehensive skills needed for real-world driving, where unpredictable situations require more than rote memorization of test routes or examiner preferences. Allowing the parent to directly instruct the student on how to trick the examiner or focus only on what the examiner wants to see, without the instructor's oversight or correction, is a severe breach of professional conduct. This approach encourages deceptive practices and bypasses the structured, safety-focused curriculum required by New Brunswick driver education. It abdicates the instructor's responsibility to impart safe driving knowledge and skills, potentially leading to a driver who is not truly prepared for the responsibilities of operating a vehicle. Professional reasoning. Professionals in driver instruction must adopt a decision-making process rooted in regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility. This involves 1. Understanding and strictly adhering to the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Act and the standards set by the Department of Public Safety for driver training and examination. 2. Prioritizing the safety of the student and the public above all else. 3. Maintaining objective assessment criteria for student progress, independent of external pressures. 4. Communicating transparently and professionally with students and their guardians regarding expectations, progress, and readiness for licensing. 5. Recognizing that the role of an instructor is to develop competent and safe drivers, not merely to facilitate passing a test. Question 20. Cost-benefit analysis shows that renewing a New Brunswick driver's license costs $75, and the expiry date is approaching. However, a new driver's license costs $100 to obtain if the current one expires. If the renewal is late, a penalty of $5 per month is applied, with a maximum penalty of $60. The driver has 3 months until expiry and is considering waiting until after expiry to renew, believing it might be cheaper. What is the total potential cost if the driver waits until 3 months after expiry to renew their New Brunswick driver's license? Option A, $75. Option B, $135. Option C, $175. Option D, $100. The correct answer is B, $135. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial implications of a decision with the long-term safety and compliance obligations mandated by New Brunswick's driver licensing regulations. A driver must make a judgment call that prioritizes adherence to the law and public safety over potential cost savings. The correct approach involves accurately calculating the total cost of renewing the driver's license, including all applicable fees and potential late penalties, and comparing this to the cost of obtaining a new license if the renewal is missed. This approach is correct because New Brunswick law, as outlined in the Motor Vehicle Act and associated regulations, mandates timely renewal of driver's licenses. Failure to renew by the expiry date results in the license becoming invalid, and operating a vehicle with an invalid license carries significant penalties, including fines and potential impoundment of the vehicle. The cost-benefit analysis should therefore factor in the certainty of renewal fees versus the unpredictable and potentially much higher costs associated with driving illegally. This aligns with the ethical obligation of all drivers to maintain legal and safe operation of their vehicles. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the immediate renewal fee and disregard the potential for late penalties or the consequences of driving with an expired license. This fails to account for the full financial and legal ramifications of noncompliance. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that a grace period exists beyond the official expiry date without consulting official New Brunswick motor vehicle regulations. This assumption is dangerous as it can lead to operating a vehicle illegally. Finally, an approach that prioritizes avoiding the renewal fee by simply not driving until the situation is resolved, without understanding the implications of an expired license on future applications or potential reinstatement fees, is also flawed as it doesn't address the core issue of maintaining legal driving status. Professionals in this situation should use a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant legal requirements and associated costs. This involves consulting official sources for fee structures, renewal deadlines, and penalties for noncompliance. The next step is to perform a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis that includes all potential financial outlays and risks. Finally, the decision should be made based on the principle of maintaining legal compliance and prioritizing safety, even if it incurs a slightly higher immediate cost.